Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Finance and Administration Committee meeting to order. And with that, we will move to business items number 2. Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On A. Yep.
Oh, we're talking about the resolution.
Yeah, the resolution accepting a grant.
Yep, thank you.
Amplify, yep.
Sorry. So yes, this is a grant that we receive from Amplify Incorporated every year. And we will utilize the fund to fund substance abuse prevention activities in collaboration with the West Hartford Prevention Partnership Coalition and the West Hartford Prevention Council. It's an amount of $5,000, and we will use that to assist with education activities that will take place during that week. For example, drug take-back day. We'll invite guest speakers in to meet with students at our schools, as well as other activities that would be supported by the Prevention Council. Back through you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions that the council had.
Looking at the council and members of the committee, I'm seeing no questions. I think go ahead, Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. And just a quick question, and I see in the description where it does talk about mental health issues, but during the week or with students or staff or what have you, is mental health offered, provided, discussed, especially, I want to say, during our era that people are experiencing many tragedies, especially around a lot of the gun violence?
So it's a lot of it will be, good question, Councilor Blanks, and through you, Mr. Chairman. Whatever leftover funds we would utilize for mental health services as well, but a lot of it is taken up during the prevention services that we do provide the community.
All right, seeing no other questions, we'll move to item B, a resolution appropriating funds for a building inspector with the Department of Community Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this resolution would allow us to provide our Community Development Department with additional needed support in the building inspection divisions to help meet the needs of our community. You may recall that the council provided the department with additional support earlier this year, and we have lowered our inspection backlog thanks to that support from a 6-week backlog down to 2 weeks. However, we're still at that 2-week mark. We would like to lower that even further. The issue that we're running into now, and that we'll continue to run into over the next year or so, are the larger construction projects that we have going on in town. Certainly One Park is the big one that's happening right now. 950 Trout Brook is underway. But just as an example, the demands on our inspection staff over the next 6 weeks at One Park will be pretty significant. We met with the development team 2 weeks ago to plan out what we needed to accomplish over the next 6 weeks so that they could meet their timeline to open the remainder of the project. We are going to need to perform 1,000 inspections over the next 6 weeks. So what that does is it takes current staff away from residential inspections and puts them onto a project like this, thereby creating a little bit of a delay with our residential inspections. So what we would do with this position is take a part-timer, turn that part-timer into a full-timer. So it's not like we have to go out and do a recruitment. We have the staff on site so that we're able to meet the needs of the community immediately with this support. That will leave us fully staffed. We are expecting a retirement within the next year or so. So what we would do at that time is if things stabilize a little, they've been, as we know, we've talked about, crazy for the last 24, 36 months and shows no signs of letting up, which is a good thing for our local economy. But however, if it does hit that point where it levels off, then we would be in a position not to have to fill when that retirement occurs. But we'd keep the council updated as we got closer to that.
Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. So Rick, so this is 2 ads, right? So it's one that we previously approved and then this
Correct.
one. It looks like you have a long-term plan, because this ebbs and flows, right now in a boom
It's
cycle.
been a boom for a little while.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely right. So we approved that, no problem. It sounds like you have a plan. Do you foresee any other ads short-term or, okay,
This will leave us in a position to adequately meet the needs of our commercial projects as well as our residential projects. So I do not envision us needing to come back to the council for another position.
okay. And then you've
in
got the
building.
retirement that you see coming to manage
Yep,
ebbs and flows.
Yep.
That's great, thank you.
you're welcome.
Seeing no other questions, thank you. I think that this is an important thing that we move forward with, particularly since we have so many other developments going on in town right now that we really need to make sure that we're not backlogging, because I think what that trickles down to is impacting, the traditional homeowners as well that are doing a ton of work on their house right now that we're seeing as well. So we can't have like some of the developments really backlog everything for everyone, so it's important. I think we move forward on this, but thank you.
Thank you.
No, she's on mute. Moving to item C, Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this the irrigation pump station?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me. I apologize. Thank you. So we've talked about this before in the past. Our original pump was, well, not the original, but the pump that we're looking to replace was placed in the pump house in 1983. So it's 40 years old. It's well past its useful life. We were trying to extend into another year. But our maintenance crew has been working literally every day on the valves of this pump to get it up and running so that we can provide adequate irrigation to our golf course. So we are at a catastrophic point with this pump. It needs to be replaced immediately. Otherwise, we'd be in a position to have to bring water in manually on trucks and continue to keep our golf course, our wonderful looking golf course, looking the way it does. So good news, I'm not sure I can really quite say yet, but I think we might have some news to report in the next 24 hours where we would be receiving grant money from the state for this project. So that could be coming in the next 24 to 36 hours. I'm not sure I can actually report out on that quite yet. Through you, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. Council Fay.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. So, Mr. Ledwith, since this was old and obviously it needs repairing, how come we didn't budget for that? We just went through the budget.
So what we do, what this will allow us to do, that's a great question, Councilor Fay, through you, Mr. Chairman. So we do have a Rockledge Reserve Fund, so that we will withdraw these funds from the Rockledge Reserve Fund. So we take a small percentage of golf cart rentals and place that into the reserve fund. This resolution will allow us to, you're authorizing us to take the funds out of the Rockledge Reserve Fund and pay for the project. Should we receive that grant I spoke about, we would replenish the reserve fund with that dollar amount.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Also, I think this is a really important thing that we get in front of, as this has been Rockledge has constant needs, and the pumping of water on a golf course is very important, because if you don't do it right, it will ruin the entire thing. So looking forward to seeing potential news in this area.
Very soon.
All right. We'll move to item D. Resolution amending the general fund budget for fiscal year 22 and 23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask our Finance Director, Peter Bervatera, to come to the podium to discuss.
Thank you. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. I think you may recall during the course of the year, whenever I submitted a budget projection, there was always a shortfall in police and fire, whether it was related to overtime, whether it was related to special duty and training, or whether it was related to shortfalls in gasoline or vehicle maintenance or EMS supplies. What we would normally do is we would ask for the appropriation earlier in the fiscal year, but there was so much fluctuation in those two departments that I decided to wait till the end of the year when we had a better handle on it. This appropriation, which is not on the agenda for tonight's meeting, but hopefully will be on the agenda for the July meeting, basically appropriates $1.8 million to cover those expenses and to basically amend the budget and put everything in order. This will not affect the surplus. Every time I projected expenses and revenues, we always incorporated this. So there's a document that you also have showing a projection as of the, actually it's as of early May, showing a $5.2 million surplus. This is incorporated in that. It will not affect it. This is an accounting action that we need to take to amend the budget. So, so basically we're in balance.
Great. Thank you. Any questions?
Should I go into the forecast while I'm up here?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. Again, the forecast that we've been working with throughout the year, we've had a very positive year with respect to our projections. We've done very well on revenues, and again, if it not were for the public safety overages, we'd be we'd be almost balanced. I do want to report that, and I briefed the town manager on this earlier. We just finished running our projections for the end of the year. We're going to do them one more time before we close out the year. Tax collection is gone through the roof. On real property, we're collecting at 99.7%. And overall, when you incorporate motor vehicle into it, it's a little over 99.4%, which is 0.3% more than what we budgeted. We're doing well in all the categories in prior year. We're doing very well in investment earnings. Again, I was expecting, after the Fed's meeting, I was expecting the interest rates to calm down, maybe drop down a little. They're still increasing. Our short-term investment rates are 5.14%. I would have never expected that. We're expecting an additional $300,000 in revenue from that alone. As the town manager indicated, our building permits are doing great. They keep coming in, and that exceeded our expectations as well. Between the additional taxes collected, the investment income, the building permit, and some other revenue categories, contractual services, revenue that we get for the recreation programs, I wouldn't be surprised if we collected another $1 million on top of this before the end of the year. So I'll be coming back to council when we close out the year with a final estimate that'll show what the revenue is. I'll make a recommendation to the town manager. He'll make a recommendation to council as to the distribution of that revenue. The only difference this year is that the resolution that was passed, putting 1/3 of surplus into the fund balance, if you recall that. But after that, we'll make some recommendations on putting some money aside for assessment appeals that we hopefully will settle soon. And but we will have a sizable surplus that we usually recommend putting it in CNRE for future expenses. But again, we're not at that point yet. But we're in a very, very good fiscal position right now. I'm very happy with the job that the revenue collector is doing, Helene. She's really knocking it out of the park collecting. So that's where we are.
That's great. Councilor Bay?
Thanks, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Privatera, so that's great on the revenue side and expenses. And interest rates are higher than we expected, especially in the short term. We've been dealing with inflation a lot, and every time something comes before us, like a car, police car, obviously we've approved it, we need it, but the costs are significantly higher than what we planned. So do you see runaway inflation, which we still are struggling with, nibbling away at our surplus or offsetting the positives of the revenue side. Thank you.
Well, we've already addressed that in public safety. Public safety, I believe their non-payroll account overage is a little more than $500,000. And that's fuel, that's supplies, EMS supplies and materials, that's vehicle maintenance. All those costs have gone up. We weren't able to cover that in their department. But we've seen some additional increases in public works, but since we had such a mild winter, we're able to cover all those expenses. My expectation is that when we put the budget together for next year, we cautioned all the directors as to, hey, give us your best estimate at this point in time, because if the supply chain issue continues to go on, or if we're going to see inflation, then we need to be prepared for it. And my expectation is that we probably will see some increases, but we've also seen some decreases. We've seen the price of fuel go down. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but there is some moderation to that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the report, Peter. It's very encouraging news. And I guess I have a question. Is it going to impact any of the construction costs? Well, with the inflation, are we prepared for those kind of, we've seen that whether it was at Eisenhower Pool or anything, that just as an example of other inflation items that we're prepared for with this new revenue. How are we going to prepare for that as well?
The Eisenhower Pool bid, I think, took everybody by surprise. It was so, the increase was so significant. We have been going out to bid for all of our capital projects. The prices have come in close to what we budgeted. We have seen some moderation on pricing. My expectation is that that's going to continue. That's not to say if we go out to bid on something that's a specialized type of construction, we might not see a larger increase. But all the things that we normally do, the window replacement, the roof replacements, and those types of things, I have not heard from Bob Palmer or his staff that they're short, because I've been signing a lot of contracts, even on the street construction side. All that's moving forward. So I haven't heard that there's any difficulty in that area.
Seeing no other questions, move on to, Peter, thank you. I think we can move on to item E on the Starkel Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By way of background, on November 12th of 1968, the Town Council approved by resolution a 75-year lease with Fellowship Housing to construct and operate rental housing for the elderly and mobility impaired on the property known as 1050 Starkel Road. Mr. Davidoff may have been the only one who voted on that particular resolution, but the resolution also provided that the land and buildings would not be subject to the payment of any real estate taxes for so long as Fellowship Housing was obligated to repay its obligations to the United States of America and Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. You'll recall on January 24th, 2023, the council by resolution approved the execution of a new lease with Fellowship Housing so that it could secure financing to fund the renovation of the buildings and facilities on its campus. You recall that evening, a member of the Fellowship Housing presented some of the great changes that would be occurring on the campus, including moving from 161 affordable units up to 250 plus affordable units. This resolution will continue the tax abatement to the new entity for the term of the new lease, and as before, will only be in place for so long as Fellowship Housing is subject to the repayment of any financial obligations. So essentially, it's been there's been a tax abatement in place for over 50 years. By way of this resolution, that will continue under this new arrangement. Through you, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions that the council had.
Continuing to scope out my colleagues. I don't have any questions. I'm glad to move forward with this. This is obviously one of the better ideas the town has ever had. I think we should continue to support it in any way that we can, and this sounds like a great way to move forward. Seeing no other questions, I think we'll move to item F. a resolution concerning a tax assessment fixing agreement to support affordable
I'm passing
housing
around right now
at
a
Farmington Avenue.
PowerPoint presentation, which provides a summary of what we are proposing here.
Yes. And I can just like give a refresher on what we're talking about, and you can go into the deal.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So this resolution is concerning a tax fixing agreement between the affordable housing project that we have all talked about at multiple times on Farmington Avenue. This is a kind of a milestone for the town in regards to doing an affordable housing project in the middle of our town center. It has been also been I could say it's been a sore site for a lot of folks in town. It has also been the home of a lot of other issues with the restaurant that was attached to it that has also kind of plagued our police department with multiple calls. So it is great to see this moving in the direction. And I think there was a Hartford Business Journal article about this development. I don't know if folks saw that, but it was a great coverage about what is being done here in town. And this resolution is the other piece of this very complex financing of an affordable housing complex of this size. So with that, Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a great opening summary of what we're dealing with here. So we've been working very closely with the developers from WH1 Camelot LLC. Those conversations started back in the fall. We worked with them on a brownfield grant application through the Department of Economic and Community Development at the state. We were awarded that grant back in January, and that grant was totaled at $980,000. In addition, the town awarded WH1 Camelot $3 million in ARPA funds from our Affordable Housing Development Program. Both of these grants will be finalized as loans. So over time, and it will take some time, I will admit, those loans will be paid back to the town and back to the state. Back when we initially were working with the developer, this was a 44-unit complex, 40 units of affordable housing and 4 units of market price housing. Since then, the project has converted to 100% affordable. So the development will be an adaptive reuse of the current West Hartford Inn, along with new construction on the site of the shuttered restaurant that the chairman spoke of. So we will have, let's see, 13 units at 30% AMI, and we will have 9 units at 50% AMI, and then we will have 22 units at 80% AMI. So that's where we landed on in terms of the project itself. On the next page, under project funding, projects of this complexity of affordable housing have several layers of financing. So this involves low-income housing tax credits, commonly referred to as LIHTC financing. We have the brownfield grants. We have Department of Housing funds. We have deferred developer fees, which are essentially the fees that the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority agrees to pay developers to develop projects like this. We have financing through the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, and then again, we also have, as I mentioned, the Affordable Housing Development Program, the Town of West Hartford program. So again, the brownfield grants and the ARPA funds would be in the form of a loan being repaid to the town.
And can you just total that amount for?
So that would be $3.9 million of loans that would be funneled back through a majority back to the town. And I believe that the 9 would go back to the state, the $980,000 grant. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so under the following page, we talk a little bit about the proposed fixed assessment that the chairman spoke of. So housing opportunities in this development will be restricted for 40 years. So it's a 40-year deed restricted project. And it is a function of, as I mentioned, AMI. So we have several units at 30% AMI, several at 50, several at 80. You know, with a project like this, rent increases only when AMI in Hartford County increases. So, so if next year, for example, if AMI did not change in Hartford County, rents wouldn't change. And on the other hand, if AMI dropped, rents would correspondingly drop. So that makes these, from a financial perspective, more complex as well. Operating expenses for affordable housing units are higher. We've talked about that through the West Hartford Housing Authority than traditional market rate apartments due to increased oversight. So there's a tremendous amount of reporting and auditing requirements, both at the state and federal level in dealing with the various different agencies. CHAFA underwriting requires a maximum 2% escalation of rents and a 3% escalation in expenses, which keeps net operating income in projects like this very low or sometimes at a negative rate over the project's lifespan. And due to the low net operating income and high development costs, the project cannot be fully financed with the project funding sources identified previously. So in order to close that funding gap, in a sense, you have your expenses that are incurred through a project of this magnitude, the rent that is coming through those area meeting income levels, and then the real estate taxes that would be appropriated for a project like this, and then there is a gap involved here. So what we are trying to accomplish, and the developer did come to us and request some relief in our taxes, and we would do that in the form of this proposal, and that's the tax assessment fixing agreement. In this agreement, the property assessment would be established by the town council and not by the tax assessor. So and I'll walk you through a chart that identifies that. So our assessor, we would be essentially telling the assessor what the assessed value is on this particular property over the next 10 years. And the annual taxes would still be determined by applying the mill rate to that tax assessment. So we would be taking advantage of Section 1265B of the general statutes, which authorize a municipality to, by an affirmative vote of its legislative body, the town council, enter into a written agreement for a period of not more than 10 years with any party proposing to acquire an interest in real estate to fix the assessment of the real property and all improvements thereon. And if you turn to that next page, I can walk you through this chart. So, and this is the proposed fixed assessment. Oh, I didn't give you one. Here, pass that over to Leanne.
Oh,
There you go.
I got it. Here, give it back to Al. I got one.
Here you go, Alberto.
Yeah, Alberta. So in the left-hand column, you have our current assessment for the West Hartford Inn, which is $931,000. And in the middle column, you have our mill rate, current mill rate of 40.92, and then the estimated real estate taxes at that level are a little above $38,000. So what we're proposing with this fixed assessment is to fix the assessed value in that left-hand column. So in year one, it would be $1 million, year two, $1,015,000, all the way to year 10, which would be $1,143,000. And then these are just estimates, but the estimate of our mill rate right now is 40.92. Our average mill rate increase over the last 10 years has been 1.38%. So we applied that to the current mill rate, and you see that increase corresponding over the next 10 years. And then you have our real estate taxes on the right-hand column. So presently collecting $38,000. under this fixed assessment on a 100% affordable project. We would be receiving slightly higher real estate taxes with this project, starting at $41,400 and then ending in year 10 at $53,682. So better project, as the deputy mayor pointed out, than what's there right now. And it will provide us with additional real estate taxes than we're presently receiving. However, if we were to sell this, or if the developer or the owner were to sell to a private developer who was interested in market rate units or condominiums or something like that, certainly the value would be significantly higher than that.
But to that point, they would not be able to do that because they would have to keep affordable because they're the 40-year deed restriction on them though, right?
So I only said that as an example. I know, yeah, I mean, we're talking about this particular project. If this was not the project we were talking about, then
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I just
we're
want to
talking higher.
be clear, that these are deed restricted units.
They are
so
40 years, can't,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I think that's important to understand the connection between this and the 40-year deed restriction on here, because is it also understood that this may be needed to extend outside of the 10 years? Is that right too?
That's a great question. So this is under 12-65B, we are restricted to a 10-year agreement, so we can't exceed that 10 years, and we can't, go back to 1265B and look for another 10 years. So what we would do is work closely with the developer, especially as we get out to like year 5, 6, 7, and 8, and we'll have updates, at least annually in terms of the finances of the project. And we'll look at, in terms of where they are in terms of stability, funding the deferred developer fee, looking at operating expenses and things like that, and see what may be needed in years 11 through 40. But there may be a situation where we would have to come back to the council and look at some other alternative to 12-65B. These are very complicated and difficult projects to do without some kind of, tax relief situation. So, for example, I mean, with West Hartford Housing Authority, if they were to look at doing something at this particular spot, we probably wouldn't be collecting a whole lot more taxes from West Hartford Housing Authority because of their arrangement as well. So, it comes with the territory of working with a project that, we haven't done yet in West Hartford, and that's 100% affordable at this level outside of fellowship housing. Even, New Park Avenue, 540 and 618, those are 20% market rate and 80% affordable. And
I think that, the town manager and I talked a lot about this. I had a lot of questions, and I think that this is a really good plan to move forward. I think as we've had this conversation about affordable housing in town, I think one of the things that I think we are seeing is that we, as a town, in order to do affordable housing, have to put a little skin in the game. And I think this is actually a really good deal for us in the sense of what kind of service we're providing to the community. I think in other communities, you're talking about putting up a lot more money to make an affordable housing project work. What we are actually looking at is, close to $4 million in loans, plus assistance from the state that doesn't come out directly out of our. Obviously, it's all part of the larger pot, but I think what we're seeing here is we're also going to be collecting more money from this current site than we currently are. Obviously, the value of the property will go up because they are going to redevelop it, so that's the deal that we're cutting here today. So I just want to simplify what we're doing is that we have made an investment in this property because we know this is a really important portion of the center. And we have someone who's willing to do something that we've been talking a lot about and doing a significant affordable housing. And what we're seeing is not, not small ball here. We're talking about, 30% AMI, 50% AMI, 80% is what we traditionally see. And that's a good portion of this, but a good portion of this is deeply affordable housing that we don't have a lot of in the town. And so what we are doing here is creating just over 20 some odd deeply affordable housing units right in the middle of town, which I don't think any other community like ours is doing right now. I think what we see is this type of housing is developed on the outskirts of communities, and you have a whole different conversation of why those things happen. What we're talking about today is doing it right in the middle of town and mixing it in also with kind of, I think, 80% AMI housing is basically considered workforce housing in most definitions, so that we are creating kind of a really kind of nuanced development in the middle of town, right next to 2 or 3 major developments that we have going on that are going to be much higher in rent. But I think that's what makes this development really, really important. I think that this is a really good deal for the town in regards to what we're doing in regards to the proposed fixed assessment. This is not an abatement. To be clear, this is not a tax abatement. This is just a deal, as Rick laid out, that we are putting forth with the owner of this property for 10 years. It will likely have to continue on past, actually I can't speak because there are people that have served here for a long time, maybe past most of us here that will see this, but I think again, these units are deed restricted for 40 years, so that hopefully this project stays as is for that time. I strongly support us moving in this direction. Again, this in fact currently would have us we're taking in more money than we currently do off of that site. So I strongly support us moving in this direction. If folks have questions, I've asked a million questions at this point on this project. Mary, feel free.
Yeah, well, I have not had the benefit of seeing this before. In fact, it's another one that's been sprung on us the night of the council meeting that we're going to vote on, which I vehemently disagree with. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think there's a lot of work that went into this, and the numbers are hard to understand for me, a financial expert, let alone everybody else around the table. And I think springing it on us is not the way to go. It reminds me of budget night. I don't like the process, so that's troubling. There's a lot in here. And, just go through the list. Low-income housing credits, I don't know what that's worth. DECD brownfield funds, what's that worth? Department of Housing funds, what's that worth? Deferred developer fees, what's that worth? All these things have a sign. So what's the developer got for skin in the game? He's getting $1 million property to develop. Who knows what it's going to be worth afterwards? And he's going to be paying taxes on the $1 million initial worth, which he got for free. Our job is not to enrich developers. Our job, there's profit margin built in here. They can make this work. I am very concerned about the tax abatement we did give, the first one ever, from what I've been told, at least in my history, and now we're going down that path again. If the numbers don't work, then we need a different kind of project. That's what free enterprise and capitalism is all about. All these subsidies are killing the taxpayer. We just hit them with another increase. We've been increased. Nobody, not one single resident is benefiting from all this development. I want to know who is, because it's not the taxpayer. The taxes keep going up. Now, I am not opposed to low-income housing at all. I grew up in a town that had a lot of it. A lot of my friends grew up in the projects, and they're still my friends to this day. That's not what the issue is here. It's the financing, and I don't like it.
Well, I think I can jump in on that. So one, in regards to
That's my job.
we're having a conversation. In regards to the developer making oodles of money on this, that's not going to be the case, because they are deed restricted for 40 years. They cannot do anything other than affordable units for 40 years. They cannot sell it. They cannot move it unless it is affordable housing, which is fixed based on federal and state numbers. So that's just to answer that issue. In regards to the other fees, I think Rick can probably speak to those more directly, but it's in regards to how we have gotten to this point, one, I will say that the agenda was posted last week, so it's not being sprung on you last minute. It's it's posted as it's supposed to, Mary. I will just say that.
Posting is one thing, talking about it is another.
Well,
Sorry.
okay, well, we have talked about this issue before. And I will say that, one, I'll let Rick answer the other questions. That, Mary, those are valid questions of what are the other fees and whatnot that are a part of this. But I will say that this isn't, the developer isn't going to have the opportunity to flip this property into something that it becomes commercial, in the sense that they are required with these units. They're all deed restricted, so that they cannot do anything outside of what they have agreed to for those 40 years, because that's what we are agreeing to with them. So I'll let Rick answer the rest of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll attempt to answer all of your questions, Councilor Fay. And as I started, these are complex. These are complex projects, but they're very, from a financing perspective, very fixed. So everything that we've seen that was presented to us has also been presented to the Department of Housing and Connecticut Housing Financing Authority. They're not approved yet from CHFA. That would happen after they were to receive this fixed tax assessment resolution that we're discussing tonight. If they were not to get it, then the project itself couldn't happen because the numbers don't work. And at the end of the day, the developer is not in a position to raise rents. The rents are fixed, so there's no profit that he's seeing at the bottom line here. So what happens in these cases is developer receives what's called a development fee from CHFA, in the amount of $3 million. So it's $1.5 million up front, and then another $1.5 million that's deferred over 12 to 15 years. So that's the fee that the developer receives for coming to West Hartford, buying this property, and developing it, which is essentially a $26 million development. But the financing is received in terms of those tax credits, and then CHFA is underwriting a significant portion of it
And
as well.
and to jump in, that's a universal fee that's applicable to anyone who does affordable.
Yeah,
It's it's not unique to this scenario. That's when you get into this type of development. I think actually really, really good was the Harvard Business Journal article that actually I think lays this out. Is that what is happening because of things of which you've talked about is inflation and cost of doing just your typical commercial developments, is that those margins are becoming slimmer and slimmer for those developers, so they're not able to make the money that they want to make, that they need to make, they're running a business, to do these type of commercials. So where the government comes in and is trying to move us to get some more affordable housing is kind of guaranteeing a certain level of margin so that we can have affordable housing. Because otherwise, again, what the article did a really good job of laying out is otherwise there won't be any. And so what we're doing here today is basically making this work. And I think I understand your concern, Mary, is that, well, because this was a concern that I talked about with Rick, is I was like, I'm not here to make a developer rich. If they can't do an affordable housing development in town that makes sense, then they shouldn't do it. But I think what here is a deal, because we are actually getting one major thing. We're getting a development of an eyesore that we've had significant problems with, just from a development standpoint and from a public safety standpoint. So that's, check that box. And then the second box is we're going to make more money on this development and taxes from this agreement over the next short period of time, let's say, right? Because there's no commercial buyer right now to come in and buy that property and then turn it into high level commercial space. So let's just say that let's hypothetically throw out 5 years, right? So in the next 5 years, because that's usually what it takes for someone to come in, buy, make the do their due diligence, find the spot. So over the next 5 years, we're gonna make close to $70,000 more in taxes collected from this deal alone, and then that's halfway through this agreement that we've gotten, and that's a hypothetical situation, because maybe the owner of the property just stays there in perpetuity, right? And we have some really fantastic hotel in the middle of town. But I think I come from it from the same lens of like, I don't think that your argument is saying that we don't want affordable housing. I think it's that you have to always be careful on how you negotiate with developers, because this is what they do. They make money on these margins, and I think what the staff has done here is put together a really comprehensive package. Because if we were going to go through these checkoffs that you identified, I can't speak to the low income housing tax credits. I think Rick can. The DECD Brownfield Fund was the fund that we got from the state delegation to clean up the gas station, right? So that's that. The Department of Housing,
I'm sorry.
that was like just short of $1 million, like 900,000, right?
980,000.
Thank you.
The Department of Housing funds, I can't speak to that. That's an agreement between the developer and on this site. For developer fees, Rick just spoke to. The CHFA money, I don't know, but I can speak to the town of affordable, the rescue. That's the loan that we already approved, and that's so totaling in all. I wrote this down. It's like $4 million that we have basically already invested in making this property happen. If you count the just short of $1 million from the state, and I think we're not, and from my calculation, we're not losing anything else on this development. In fact, we're going to be gaining a whole lot. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm not saying that your issues are wrong. I think it's complicated, and like talking through it is really helpful. So
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not saying you're wrong either.
Yeah.
I think we all support, I'm sorry. I apologize, I'm out of order probably. You can bang that
That's
for me
okay.
if you
You're-
want.
you're-
I'm trying to be cordial.
You're okay.
I think we all agree that we need more housing to fit lower income people. Nobody's disagreeing with that. I think we've all been supportive of that throughout our various talks. I just think it's how you get there, and it's just a lot I mean, maybe it's my fault that I didn't know all this stuff ahead of time, but I did feel like I was out of the loop for whatever reason, and Rick just called me this morning, so it's a lot to absorb. So I'm trying to be open-minded
yeah,
and
no,
consider.
and that's why we're having the meeting
Yeah.
today on
Agreed.
it. And it is it was anticipated this would be a topic of significant discussion, because it is such a big development, and we have spent a lot of time on this one development, which has its ups and downs, but because of the significant public impact that I think it has, one, by providing, and I think Alberto has talked about this, is like not just providing workforce housing, but like deeply affordable housing is really difficult to come by, and it's really difficult to get a developer to do it right now. And so I think what we have here is not just your run-of-the-mill 80% that traditionally comes with almost every development that we have that comes with us right now. I mean, right now, almost every development we've had, right, has some sort of workforce housing component, whether it be 1 or 2 units, which, that's a whole nother argument. But I think this provides significantly, deeply affordable options that we don't have a lot, and we definitely don't have any near the center of town, which I think we are trying to kind of diversify in income, right? Like we have lots of things that are going on here with businesses coming in, and one of the things that was great about this development is on the bus line, which connects to all of our transport, and it also provides the ability for people that aren't necessarily in your top earners, but they could live in the center and work in the center, right? That would be great. So I think that's the full kind of breakdown from my perspective on it. I know that the mayor has had a lot of input and been a significant player in making this happen, and I don't know if she wants to chime in or not, but the floor is open if she wants to, but I know she's on mute.
There, and I'm sorry I was not there in person. My mom fell, and I just brought her home. So, anyway, I know I just want to thank all of you for listening and for your understanding of how difficult an affordable, especially a fully affordable development is to achieve with all the pieces. And this is something we've been talking about for years. It's been all the pieces have come together a little bit quickly with some deadlines. So we do need to make decisions quickly and need to make sure that we are hitting and making sure the developer is filing all the necessary paperwork and meets all the deadlines required that are highly statutory. So it's unfortunate sometimes that we don't have more time to go through things or to kick them and kick the tires or whatever. But that is the reality, and the fact is that there's significant a fully quality, affordable housing project or development that is in the most highly valuable area of town is up to us to make happen. Those pieces do not happen by themselves. The developer would not come in and do that, and this is us making the final step to making this development happen. So, thank you.
Okay, sorry, doing magical microphones. Yeah, well done. Looking around to see if there are other questions, comments. Alberto.
Through you, Chairperson. So my question is, in the simplest way as possible, what is proposed fixed assessment versus an abatement? Especially on I'm guessing on this column, versus the abatement we did over there. How does this differ? I think that's important.
I can take a stab at it.
Yeah.
So I think if you look at this right here,
Yeah.
this is basically the difference, right? So an abatement would be over a certain amount of time you are not paying taxes at all, right?
Okay.
Or you could make a percentage of that. So you'd be wiping away a percentage or the payment of taxes to the town during that time period. What this is doing is fixing the valuation of the property that would obviously, we've seen in town grow at a substantial rate. What this does is it fixes it at these numbers over the certain amount of time so that you pay this schedule of payments over a period of time. So let's say, because what could happen is they could have, what they're doing, the reason for this is they're going to have the development, they're going to put a ton of money into it, and I can say our good assessor will most likely value it at probably double or triple or what it is currently, right? So then they're paying double or triple the taxes on that property. But it is also being used as a service to the town in regards to offering deeply affordable housing. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and Mary, let me
of
get
course.
folks for the first time. Carol, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what you indicated there, and just to differentiate this from the abatement for fellowship housing, which is the nonprofit organization, so they're not paying taxes, versus here, where it is a for-profit developer, and they are still paying taxes to the town of West Hartford for the property, but we're giving them a schedule so that what taxes they pay are more knowable into the future, as opposed to it helps them to get the financing and that stacked financing that they need in order to make the project come into being. And that's, I would just differentiate that, since we have the fellowship housing on our agenda tonight as well. to see the difference between those two pieces right there.
Carol?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think this is a great idea. And I know everybody knows that this has been an eyesore for quite some time. And I think it's in a good spot. I know we have had multiple discussions around affordable housing and workplace housing, and many folks have even approached me within the last couple of weeks in terms of the town council and our position on affordable housing and what does that even mean? What is affordable? What may be affordable to the developer and what may be affordable to us and what may be affordable to the person or to the renter who's renting can be three different things. So I just appreciate what we've done, the collaboration with folks coming to the council and wanting to do affordable housing. And as many of us had said, I think it's in a key location because we talk about walkability, we talk about it on our public transportation line, but I think some of the things we have not said is this particular location is so key because not only does it connect to the center, but I think we're missing that it also connects to our neighboring towns. It connects to Farmington and Bloomfield and Hartford. And also, we have to think about our students as well, our college students who are either going to Tungus or University of Hartford or University of Connecticut, the Hartford campus, and how important, because I see these students all the time, and I just find it amazing because I think about 20 years ago and 30 years ago when all buses stopped at downtown Hartford and that was it. So we've really come a long way, and I think this project is another one of those fantastic visions that this council have had. But I do have a question in terms of, and I hate to bring this up because I know this might be a sore spot, but we've been getting a lot of the questions about parking. And I know the West Hartford Inn has that under whatever parking. So are we going to lose that parking? Is that parking going to be enhanced? How would the parking be either assigned to potential renters? And then I would like to ask the question, Rick, and I don't know if you know this, but what rent, I guess, margin are we looking at, or the developer looking at, or have they shared that? Because again, when people ask me about affordability and rent, I want to be able to intelligently answer the question and not give an astronomical number, and they're looking at me like I got four heads.
So in terms of, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councilor Blank's questions, so in terms of parking, yeah, the parking will remain underneath the development. The current restaurant will be reconstructed into units as you're facing the building to the left, and the parking will be underneath and then behind the building. And there is adequate parking. It has gone through planning and zoning. I don't recall the exact number of spots. You probably don't remember either off the top of your head, but I can get that information. And then the rents, we're looking for, at the 30% level, you're looking at $600 for a one-bedroom, $700 for a two-bedroom. At 50%, you're moving up in that $900, $1,000 range. And then at 80%, you're in that $1,500, $1,600 range. You're welcome.
Other questions, comments? All right. Oh, Mary, you had a question for the second time, right?
I just want to make sure I understand things, so thank you for explaining some things earlier. So with the schedule on the taxes, just in rough numbers, I don't have an adding machine with me or calculator. So if they're going to put $26 million into it, ideally, the property would be worth, when it's all developed, I don't know, $30 million? If I just add 26 of development costs plus the brownfield and all that stuff, just call it 30 for lack of a better word. So that would be, the assessment would be 21 million. So at our mill rate, that would be something like, God, my math is so bad now. I just want to follow the logic here if I'm doing this right. Would be something like $2 million of taxes, so 38,000.
I think we have to kind of look at that number. Rick, did you have a?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So the actual, so when you look at all the construction costs, that's one thing. The value of the property would not be the value of the construction costs. So the value of the property, if we were to, as Deputy Mayor pointed out, had our assessor assess it, it would be assessed at a value in that $3, $4, $5 million range, not 26 million. So your mill rate would be applied to the assessed value of the property, not
Correct.
the development
I'm
costs.
sorry, I want to go in order here.
Go ahead,
So
go ahead.
through you, Chairman.
Yeah, it's okay.
I want to make sure I'm going in order here. But in my example, normal property, once it's developed, gets taxed at 70% of that value. So I'm just, to answer Alberto's question about abatement, this is more tax relief than a small portion of abatement over years, because you're still going to have the development costs and cost of the real property in there. This is only the cost of the land, and keeping it flat. So this is a very good tax incentive. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm just trying to fill in the blanks of what it really means. Because normally under normal, I mean, I expect all these buildings that are going up now, they're going to be taxed at 70% of the appraised value once it's up and running. And this one is sticking at $1 million. So it is a big deal to make a decision
Correct.
on this.
Yeah, but the projects aren't the same. So the project at 950 Trout Brook and Farmington Avenue, the byline, are two completely apples compared to this orange.
Agree, but I'm just
Yeah.
talking about the foregone tax could be.
Yeah.
So it is, it's great that we're getting 38 versus 0, but not so great where we could have a big number there, and it's a long time. I just gotta absorb my mind around all this. It's a lot. Thank you.
I appreciate your perspective, Mary. There's an expression that I have used a lot that is a very old expression that comes to me. One in the hand is better than two in the bush. And I feel like we have for years talked about having this conversation of developing this property going over and over and over again. There have been lots of people, they have never sold this property. We have this in front of us. We have a really good public service coming out of it. Actually, we have, again, as I talked about, 2 really good public services. We don't have another, unknown entity going into that restaurant that has over and over again been a nuisance for the police. And we have deeply affordable housing going in the middle of our town. And I think that those are 2 significant benefits to the community, that we also aren't making a significant investment from a cash flow standpoint from the town either. Like that's a thing that other communities have to do. And we have found a really, thanks to the mayor's leadership, a great idea on the loan program that we've set up. I think that's a great way to use ARPA funding. And we do not have a lot of cash expenses on a development of affordable housing going in the middle of our town. And so I understand what your point on the taxes, but I don't think that we're really missing out on that much as opposed to the service that we are actually getting. So I think it really is they cancel one another out in this scenario, and I think this is a really good deal for us. All right, I think that Mark has a question. Okay, cool. Mark, after you.
All right, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, and you may have said this, Rick or Liam, the proposed assessment, fixed assessments, 931 to the 1.43 over 10 years. How was that developed? Who came, the estimated mill rate, I can get that. Estimated real estate taxes, I understand, but the first number, why those numbers? Why did we start there? How was that developed? And I may have missed it.
No, you didn't, and that's a good question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councilor Zdanowitz's question. So essentially, we looked at the model. So you looked at the expenses of operating this development. So that's everything that's developed, construction costs, land acquisition costs, operating expenses, yearly operating expenses once it's up and running, and then the revenue that you're deriving from the rents, and those are significantly reduced rents, especially at 30% AMI and 50% AMI. And then at the end, there was the line item for real estate taxes and what could this development afford to pay in real estate taxes. And this was vetted through CHFA, through DOH, and then ultimately us. So we essentially took the assessed value of the current property, added a factor to that, and that ended up with a number that would actually work in the formula. Anything more than that, if we were to double it to a $3 or $4 million assessed value, and the project couldn't work. And we sent this out to an outside consultant as well to have them review the numbers. In addition, obviously CHFA's underwritten it. And we got the same result back from them. These are how these projects work. We've never done one like this in West Hartford at this level. We have West Hartford Housing Authority. That's a separate arrangement, but that would essentially, incur or result in the same dollar amount of property taxes for this type of project.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, I will move on to hold on, sorry, because we were so deep in this conversation, I lost where we were online. Yes, communications, sorry. Communications. I don't believe we have any communications, is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. We'd move into executive session.
All right, that's great. So without objection, I move that we enter into executive session, discuss 3 pending tax appeals, Boulevard Shops LLC and Boulevard Shops LLC versus the Town of West Hartford, Fair Lawn Enterprises LLC versus the Town of West Hartford, 1049 New Britain Avenue LLC versus the Town of West Hartford. Seeing no objection, the motion passes. I invite the town manager, the tax assessor, deputy corporation counsel, and attorney Collins from Heller and Sage to join us in the executive session. We'll see you soon.
Well, there was one in New Britain. Yeah, but.
We're good to go. All right, coming back in, without objection, I move to ratify the settlements for the 3 pending tax appeals. One, the Boulevard Shops LLC and Boulevard Shops 2 LLC versus the Town of West Hartford on the 2021 grand list, and the fair market value of the land and buildings located at 463 Prospect Avenue is $7.5 million. 2, Fairlawn Enterprises LLC versus the Town of West Hartford on the 2021 grand list. The fair market value of the land and the buildings located at 101 Park Road is $262,000. Item 3, 1049 New Britain Avenue LLC versus the Town of West Hartford on the 2021 grand list. The fair market value of the land and buildings located at 1045 New Britain Avenue is $306,000.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing no, we will take a voice vote. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Seems that we have a unanimous decision, and with that, I will make a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting without objection.